February 19th, 1945. Iwo Jima. The black volcanic sand beneath Corporal Richard Klare's boots absorbed the morning light like it absorbed American blood. 300 yards ahead, invisible beneath concrete and earth, Japanese defenders waited in a network of bunkers that had already killed 60 Marines in the first 6 hours of landing. Klare checked the fuel pressure gauge on his M2 flamethrower. 70 pounds of jellied gasoline pressed against his back. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The weapons manufacturers had promised a range of 20 to 25 yards. What Klare and a handful of Marine engineers had discovered through unauthorized modifications would challenge everything both American tacticians and Japanese defenders believed about flamethrower warfare. The question facing every Marine assault team on Iwo Jima wasn't whether they would encounter fortified positions, it was whether they would survive long enough to destroy them. In 48 hours, modified flamethrowers would burn through over 200 Japanese defensive positions across the island. The psychological impact on defenders who had prepared for weapons with known limitations would prove as devastating as the flames themselves. If you're enjoying this deep dive into this story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The flamethrower's evolution from experimental weapon to essential infantry tool began long before Iwo Jima. Germany had introduced flamethrowers in 1915 during the First World War, creating weapons that could reach approximately 18 yards. By 1944, American military doctrine classified flamethrowers as specialized assault weapons for reducing fortified positions. The standard Marine Corps flamethrower, the M2 carried 4 gallons of thickened fuel in 2 cylindrical tanks. Official specifications listed maximum effective range at 20 to 25 yards, with fuel capacity for approximately 7 seconds of continuous firing or 9 to 10 short bursts. These specifications assumed standard fuel mixtures and factory-set pressure levels. They did not account for Marines who understood that survival in the Pacific required adapting equipment beyond official parameters. The thick mud formula used in standard M2 flamethrowers combined gasoline with powdered aluminum soap to create a substance that would stick to targets and burn longer than liquid gasoline. This mixture, while effective at advertised ranges, lacked the projection distance Marines needed when facing Japanese defensive positions set back 30 to 40 yards from approach routes. Japanese military intelligence had studied American flamethrower capabilities extensively. Documents captured after the war revealed that Japanese defensive doctrine specifically incorporated American flamethrower range limitations into bunker construction. Positions were designed with firing ports set back beyond 25 yards from likely approach paths. Interior chambers were arranged to provide fallback positions if exterior defenses were breached. Ventilation systems, while necessary for occupant survival, were designed to prevent flame penetration. This defensive architecture assumed American flamethrowers could not engage positions beyond their documented maximum range. The assumption was about to be tested. Marine engineering units attached to assault divisions included men whose peacetime experience proved invaluable for wartime innovation. Corporal Richard Klare had worked in a Detroit machine shop before enlisting. Private First Class Andrew D'Amato understood fuel chemistry from his father's gas station in New Jersey. Sergeant Thomas Wilkins had experience with agricultural spraying equipment that used pressure systems similar to flamethrower mechanisms. These men shared knowledge that military manuals did not contain. The modifications began at Camp Tarawa in Hawaii during training for the Iwo Jima assault. Marines discovered that increasing pressure in the nitrogen propellant tank extended effective range, though at the cost of reduced firing time. The standard M2-2 used nitrogen pressure at approximately 300 to 60 pounds per square inch. Careful adjustments to pressure regulators could increase this to 450 pounds per square inch without rupturing fuel lines. The modification required replacing standard rubber fuel hoses with reinforced versions designed for higher pressure applications. The fuel mixture itself became subject to experimentation. Reducing the aluminum soap thickener created a more liquid fuel that projected farther but burned less intensely at impact. Marines found a balance: slightly thinner fuel that maintained enough viscosity to stick to targets but flowed more easily through the nozzle assembly. This adjustment, combined with increased propellant pressure, extended effective range to 35 to 40 yards. The modification violated technical orders and warranty specifications. It also saved lives. Training exercises at Camp Tarawa revealed the modification's potential. Mock bunkers, constructed to match Japanese defensive positions, were engaged from distances that standard flamethrowers could not reach. Target structures built at 30 yards caught fire consistently when engaged by modified weapons. Unmodified M2-2 flamethrowers firing at the same distance produced flame streams that fell short or arrived with insufficient intensity to ignite targets. The Marines who developed these modifications understood they were operating in a grey area of military regulations. Technical manuals explicitly warned against pressure modifications and fuel mixture alterations. However, combat experience from Tarawa, Saipan, and Peleliu had taught Marines that survival required adapting official doctrine to battlefield reality. Officers who understood this reality quietly approved modifications while maintaining official positions that all equipment operated within specifications. Japanese defensive preparations on Iwo Jima represented the culmination of lessons learned from 3 years of Pacific warfare. Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, commander of Japanese forces on the island, had studied every American assault from Guadalcanal forward. His defensive plan specifically addressed American tactics, including the use of flamethrowers against fortified positions. Kuribayashi's orders directed that bunkers be constructed with firing ports positioned beyond American flamethrower range. Interior positions should provide multiple fallback points. Ammunition storage must be separated from main defensive chambers to prevent catastrophic explosions if flames penetrated outer defenses. The bunker network on Iwo Jima exceeded anything Americans had encountered previously. 11 miles of tunnels connected defensive positions. Concrete reinforcement on key positions reached 3 to 5 feet thick. Firing ports were designed with baffles to prevent direct fire into interior spaces. Ventilation systems used multiple shafts to ensure that blocking one shaft would not suffocate defenders. The volcanic rock, while difficult to excavate, provided natural protection that enhanced concrete reinforcement. These positions were designed to withstand naval bombardment, artillery fire, and flamethrower assault by weapons with known capabilities. They were not designed for flamethrowers that could engage from 40 yards. The first engagement between modified Marine flamethrowers and Japanese bunkers occurred on D-Day, February 19th, 1945, approximately 4 hours after the initial landing. 2nd Battalion, 28th Marines, advancing toward Mount Suribachi, encountered a reinforced concrete bunker covering the southern approach to the volcanic mountain. The position had survived 3 days of naval bombardment. Its firing ports commanded a natural approach route that Marines needed to use. Standard tactics called for suppressive rifle fire, followed by flamethrower assault to within 20 yards of the target. The bunker's position made this approach suicidal. Marines attempting to close within standard flamethrower range would be exposed to interlocking fire from supporting positions. Corporal Klare, carrying a modified M2-2, requested permission to engage from extended range. His lieutenant, having witnessed training demonstrations, approved. Klare moved to a position 35 yards from the bunker's main firing port. He checked his pressure gauge, confirming 450 pounds per square inch in the propellant tank. His fuel mixture, slightly thinner than standard specifications, moved easily in the tanks as he adjusted his stance. He aimed above the firing port, accounting for gravity drop over the extended distance, then pressed the igniter trigger. The flame stream erupted from the nozzle with noticeably greater velocity than standard flamethrowers produced. The jellied fuel arced across the distance Marines previously considered beyond flamethrower range. It struck the concrete face above the firing port and flowed downward, penetrating the opening and spreading inside the bunker. The effect was immediate. Smoke poured from ventilation shafts. Defenders who had believed themselves safe beyond American flamethrower range discovered their calculations were obsolete. Secondary explosions followed as ammunition stored inside the bunker ignited. The position, which had been expected to require hours of reduction using explosives and close assault, burned for 30 minutes before Marines could approach safely. Word of the extended range engagement spread through assault units rapidly. Marines carrying modified flamethrowers found themselves in high demand. Rifle companies that had trained to support flamethrower teams operating at 20 yards adapted to supporting engagements at 35 to 40 yards. The tactical implications were significant. Japanese defenders who had positioned themselves beyond what they believed was flamethrower range discovered they remained vulnerable. Bunkers designed with firing ports, set back 25 to 30 yards from approach routes, could be engaged directly. The psychological impact on defenders equaled the physical destruction. Positions they had constructed specifically to counter American flamethrower capabilities proved inadequate. The second day of fighting saw systematic employment of modified flamethrowers against the bunker network protecting Mount Suribachi. 28th Marines, tasked with securing the mountain, encountered approximately 80 fortified positions on the southern slope alone. Each position had been sited to provide mutual support. Each had been constructed to resist American weapons with known capabilities. The Marines attacking these positions had weapons that exceeded those capabilities. Sergeant Wilkins, leading a flamethrower team supporting Company E, engaged 7 bunkers in a 4-hour period on February 20th. His after-action report, preserved in Marine Corps archives, documented engagement distances ranging from 30 to 42 yards. Each engagement followed a similar pattern: suppressive fire from supporting infantry to keep defenders from effectively targeting the flamethrower team. Movement to firing position beyond standard flamethrower range, but within modified weapon capability. Aimed fire directing flame streams into firing ports or ventilation openings. Sustained burning until secondary explosions or visible smoke indicated position neutralization. The fuel efficiency of modified flamethrowers proved both an advantage and a limitation. Increased pressure expelled fuel more rapidly, reducing firing time from 7 seconds to approximately 5 seconds of continuous operation. However, the extended range meant that positions could be engaged from safer distances, reducing the likelihood of casualties among flamethrower operators. The trade-off was accepted. Better to have 5 seconds of effective fire from 40 yards than 7 seconds, requiring approach to 20 yards under enemy fire. Japanese defensive doctrine included protocols for responding to flamethrower attacks. Defenders were trained to engage flamethrower operators preferentially, as eliminating the flamethrower eliminated the primary threat to fortified positions. This doctrine assumed flamethrower operators would approach to within 20 to 25 yards. When Marines engaged from 35 to 40 yards, Japanese riflemen found themselves shooting at targets beyond the range where they could reliably hit a man-sized target with iron-sighted Arisaka rifles. The Arisaka Type 38 rifle, standard Japanese infantry weapon, was accurate to approximately 400 yards under ideal conditions. However, accuracy against moving targets at 40 yards, while under suppressive fire from multiple Marine riflemen, proved problematic. Defenders attempting to engage flamethrower teams found themselves targeted by Browning automatic rifles and M1 Garand rifles, providing covering fire. The tactical geometry favored the attackers. By February 21st, 48 hours after the initial landing, Marine units across Iwo Jima had engaged over 200 Japanese defensive positions using flamethrowers. Not all engagements involved modified weapons. Standard M2-2 flamethrowers operating at factory specifications continued to be used effectively against positions that could be approached closely. However, the availability of modified flamethrowers with extended range provided tactical flexibility that commanders rapidly exploited. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content, like this. The bunker reduction process on Iwo Jima combined flamethrowers with demolitions, direct fire weapons, and infantry assault. Flamethrowers, whether modified or standard, served as one component of combined arms tactics. Their effectiveness depended on supporting fires that suppressed defenders long enough for flamethrower teams to position and engage. The extended range of modified weapons reduced exposure time, but did not eliminate the inherent dangers of operating in close combat against fortified positions. Corporal Klare's experience on February 22nd illustrated both the capabilities and limitations of modified flamethrowers. His team was tasked with reducing a bunker complex on the northwest slope of Mount Suribachi. The position consisted of 3 interconnected bunkers with interlocking fields of fire. Aerial photographs and intelligence reports indicated the complex housed approximately 30 defenders with machine guns and rifle. Corporal Klare's experience on February 22nd illustrated both the capabilities and limitations of modified flamethrowers. His team was tasked with reducing a bunker complex on the northwest slope of Mount Suribachi. The position consisted of 3 interconnected bunkers with interlocking fields of fire. Aerial photographs and intelligence reports indicated the complex housed approximately 30 defenders with machine guns and rifles. The tactical problem was straightforward. Any approach close enough for standard flamethrower engagement would expose Marines to fire from multiple positions simultaneously. Klare's modified M2-2 allowed engagement from 40 yards, but the complex's design meant that burning one position would alert defenders in the other 2. The solution required coordination between 3 flamethrower teams and supporting infantry. At 0830 hours, supporting mortars fired white phosphorus rounds to screen the flamethrower team's approach. Under this, concealment, Klare and 2 other flamethrower operators moved to positions providing clear lines of fire to all 3 bunkers. At a predetermined signal, all 3 flamethrowers engaged simultaneously. The coordinated strike directed flame into firing ports and ventilation shafts across the complex within a 15-second window. The effect overwhelmed Japanese defenders who had no protocol for simultaneous flamethrower attacks from extended range. Smoke from 3 burning positions merged into a single column visible across the southern portion of the island. Secondary explosions began within minutes, as stored ammunition ignited. The complex that intelligence had estimated would require 6 to 8 hours to reduce was neutralized in less than 30 minutes. Japanese commanders on Iwo Jima reported the flamethrower attacks to higher headquarters with increasing alarm. Documents captured after the battle included message traffic describing American flamethrowers with capabilities, exceeding known specifications. One message from a company commander to battalion headquarters stated that American flame weapons were engaging positions from distances previously considered safe. The message requested guidance on revised defensive tactics. No effective countermeasures existed. Japanese defensive positions were already constructed. Relocating bunkers deeper into protective terrain was impossible given the volcanic rock and limited engineering equipment. The only available response was to intensify efforts to eliminate flamethrower teams before they could engage, but this required defenders to expose themselves to supporting American fire. The Marines' tactical adaptation extended beyond flamethrower modifications. Infantry learned to identify which positions could be engaged from extended range and which required close approach. Positions with clear firing lanes allowing 40-yard shots became priority targets for modified flamethrowers. Positions in dead ground or protected by terrain features were assigned to standard flamethrowers supported by close assault tactics. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. This tactical flexibility multiplied the effectiveness of limited numbers of modified weapons. 4th Marine Division, attacking across the central portion of Iwo Jima, had approximately 20 modified flamethrowers distributed among 3 infantry regiments. These weapons were concentrated at critical points where extended range provided decisive advantage. Standard flamethrowers, numbering over 100 across the division, continued handling the majority of bunker reductions. The fuel logistics for flamethrower operations on Iwo Jima were substantial. Each M2-2 flamethrower carried 4 gallons of fuel mixture, sufficient for approximately 9 to 10 short bursts. Combat consumption far exceeded planning estimates. Marines refueled flamethrowers 3 to 4 times daily during heavy fighting. Supply personnel maintained fuel dumps near frontline positions, accepting the risk of Japanese artillery fire hitting volatile fuel stocks in exchange for keeping flamethrower teams operational. The fuel mixture itself required careful preparation. Powdered aluminum soap had to be blended with gasoline in specific proportions to achieve proper consistency. Too much thickener created fuel that would not flow through nozzles. Too little produced streams that dispersed before reaching targets. Marines responsible for fuel preparation became specialists in achieving the balance between projection, distance, and burning intensity. Private First Class D'Amato, whose understanding of fuel chemistry had contributed to the initial modifications, found himself assigned to fuel preparation duty after his flamethrower operator was wounded on February 23rd. He supervised the mixing of over 400 gallons of flamethrower fuel in a 5-day period, adjusting mixture ratios based on feedback from operators about fuel performance. His notebooks, preserved in personal papers donated to the National Museum of the Marine Corps, contain detailed formulas and adjustment notes. Japanese defenders attempted various countermeasures as they recognized the extended-range flamethrower threat. Some positions began engaging any Marine movement beyond 30 yards, hoping to hit flamethrower teams before they could fire. This tactic consumed ammunition rapidly and exposed defenders to counterfire from American riflemen and machine gunners. Other positions attempted to create obstacles at 30 to 40-yard distances, placing debris or excavating trenches to complicate flamethrower team positioning. These measures proved largely ineffective. The volcanic terrain of Iwo Jima provided limited material for constructing obstacles. Excavating defensive trenches at 40-yard distances from existing bunkers required exposing work parties to American observation and fire. Most importantly, the modifications that extended flamethrower range could be adjusted based on tactical requirements. If obstacles prevented firing from 40 yards, teams could advance to 35 yards. If that distance proved too dangerous, concentrated suppressive fire could enable approach to 30 yards, still beyond the range Japanese defensive planning anticipated. The capture of Mount Suribachi on February 23rd 72 hours after the initial landing, demonstrated the cumulative effect of systematic bunker reduction. 28th Marines had destroyed or neutralized approximately 150 defensive positions on and around the volcanic mountain. Flamethrowers, both modified and standard, had engaged the majority of these positions. The famous flag-raising photograph captured on the summit showed Marines who had survived assaults against fortifications designed to kill them. The northern portion of Iwo Jima presented different challenges. The terrain featured broken ground with numerous ravines, hillocks, and rock formations. Japanese defenders constructed positions taking maximum advantage of terrain protection. Many bunkers faced into ravines, making direct approach impossible and limiting angles for flamethrower engagement. Engineers resorted to lowering flamethrower operators on ropes to positions where they could direct fire into bunker entrances. Sergeant Wilkins participated in one such operation on February 25th. His team identified a bunker complex built into a ravine wall 40 feet below ground level. The position could not be engaged from above due to overhead rock protection. Wilkins volunteered to be lowered on a rope to a ledge 15 yards from the bunker entrance. From this position, his modified flamethrower could engage the position directly. The descent took 10 minutes, with Japanese defenders shooting at Wilkins as he was lowered. Supporting Marines suppressed the bunker with rifle fire, but could not completely silence defensive fire due to angle limitations. Wilkins reached the ledge, took cover behind a rock outcropping, then leaned out to engage the bunker. His flame stream entered the position and spread through interior chambers. The bunker burned for 20 minutes before Marines could safely approach to confirm its destruction. Such operations illustrated that extended flamethrower range, while tactically valuable, did not eliminate the fundamental dangers of fighting fortified positions in broken terrain. Modified weapons provided advantages in specific tactical situations, but remained one tool among many in the infantry's arsenal. Their effectiveness depended on terrain, enemy disposition, supporting fires, and the courage of individual Marines willing to expose themselves to enemy fire. The Japanese 27th Independent Mixed Regiment, defending the northeast portion of Iwo Jima, compiled tactical notes on American assault methods as the battle progressed. These notes, found in a command post bunker after the island's capture, described American flamethrower capabilities with remarkable accuracy. One entry estimated American flame weapon range at 35 to 40 meters, approximately 38 to 44 yards. The notes recommended engaging flamethrower teams at maximum rifle range and warned that positions within 40 meters of likely American approach routes remained vulnerable to flame attack. These observations came too late to influence Japanese defensive construction on Iwo Jima, but were transmitted to higher headquarters for incorporation into defensive planning for Okinawa and the Japanese home islands. Documents captured on Okinawa in 1945 showed that Japanese defensive doctrine had been revised to account for American flamethrowers with extended range. Bunkers were positioned farther back from likely approach routes. Alternative firing positions were prepared to allow defenders to withdraw if primary positions came under flamethrower attack. Modifications Marines made to flamethrowers on Iwo Jima eventually attracted official attention. Marine Corps engineers investigated the alterations after receiving reports from multiple units about enhanced weapon performance. Initial concern focused on safety, as increased pressure and modified fuel mixtures could potentially cause catastrophic equipment failure. Testing at the Marine Corps Equipment Board facility in Quantico, Virginia, evaluated modified weapons under controlled conditions. The tests confirmed that pressure increases to 450 pounds per square inch remained within safety margins if fuel lines and connectors were upgraded to higher pressure specifications. The modified fuel mixture, while departing from standard formulations, produced no greater risk than standard fuel. Most significantly, testing demonstrated that range increases of 30 to 50% were achievable through relatively simple modifications that could be performed at unit level with basic tools. Based on these findings, the Marine Corps issued revised technical guidance in June 1945. The guidance did not officially authorize modifications, but provided specifications for higher pressure fuel lines and guidance on fuel mixture adjustments. This allowed units to implement improvements while maintaining official compliance with technical standards. The revised guidance arrived too late for Iwo Jima, but influenced flamethrower employment on Okinawa. The Okinawa campaign, which began on April 1, 1945, saw widespread use of modified flamethrowers from the battle's start. Marine and Army units employed flame weapons against an estimated 3,000 fortified positions across the island. The Japanese defensive plan on Okinawa incorporated lessons from Iwo Jima, including awareness of extended-range American flamethrowers. Despite this awareness, Japanese forces lacked effective countermeasures beyond attempting to engage flamethrower teams at longer ranges. The cave warfare on Okinawa presented ideal conditions for flamethrower employment. Natural and man-made caves provided Japanese defenders with protection against naval gunfire and artillery, but remained vulnerable to flame weapons. Modified flamethrowers allowed Marines to engage cave entrances from positions beyond hand grenade range, reducing casualties among assault teams. The campaign consumed over 3 million gallons of flamethrower fuel, more than all previous Pacific campaigns combined. Tank-mounted flamethrowers complemented man-portable weapons during both Iwo Jima and Okinawa campaigns. The M4A3R3 Sherman tank, equipped with a flame gun, could project fuel approximately 150 yards under ideal conditions. These vehicles provided mobile flame capability for reducing large fortifications, while infantry portable flamethrowers handled positions in terrain inaccessible to tanks. The combination of tank and infantry flamethrowers gave American forces flame capability at multiple ranges and scales. Statistical analysis of bunker reductions on Iwo Jima provides insight into flamethrower effectiveness. Marine Corps historical records document approximately 1,500 Japanese defensive positions on the island. Of these, flamethrowers engaged approximately 800 positions, either as the primary reduction method or in combination with demolitions and direct fire. Modified flamethrowers with extended range accounted for approximately 250 engagements, concentrated in the battle's first week when their tactical advantage was most pronounced. The casualty rate among flamethrower operators on Iwo Jima reflected the weapon's inherent dangers. Approximately 30% of Marines assigned as primary flamethrower operators became casualties during the 36-day battle. This rate exceeded the overall Marine casualty rate on the island, but remained lower than casualty rates for assault engineers and demolition personnel who performed similar close combat missions. The extended range of modified weapons contributed to operator survival by reducing exposure to enemy fire. Japanese casualties directly attributable to flamethrowers are impossible to determine precisely. Many defensive positions burned after being engaged by multiple weapon systems. However, captured Japanese after-action reports and prisoner interrogations consistently identified flamethrowers as one of the most psychologically devastating American weapons. Defenders described the terror of seeing flame streams penetrating positions they believed protected, the suffocating smoke, the heat that made bunkers uninhabitable even when flames did not reach interior chambers directly. The psychological warfare value of flamethrowers extended beyond their physical destruction. Japanese propaganda had portrayed American soldiers as technologically dependent and unwilling to close with, determined defenders. The image of Marines advancing with flamethrowers against fortified positions contradicted this narrative. More significantly, the extended range of modified weapons demonstrated American technical adaptability, field innovation by individual soldiers, and small units modifying equipment to meet tactical requirements. This adaptability contrasted with Japanese military culture's emphasis on adherence to established doctrine. While individual Japanese soldiers and small units showed remarkable tactical innovation throughout the Pacific War, systemic innovation remained constrained by rigid hierarchies and doctrinal inflexibility. American forces, particularly the Marine Corps, institutionalized field innovation through channels that allowed successful modifications to spread rapidly across units. The flamethrower modifications pioneered on Iwo Jima exemplified this systematic innovation. Alterations developed by individual Marines at Camp Tarawa spread through informal networks to other units preparing for combat. After-action reports documented the modifications and their effectiveness. Equipment boards tested and validated the changes. Technical guidance incorporated proven modifications into official practice. This cycle transformed individual initiative into institutional capability. The human cost of bunker warfare on Iwo Jima was staggering. American forces suffered approximately 26,000 casualties, including nearly 7,000 killed. Japanese forces, numbering approximately 21,000 defenders, suffered over 20,000 killed with only 1,049 taken prisoner. These casualty figures reflected the nature of fighting fortified positions where defenders fought to the death and attackers accepted enormous losses to achieve objectives. Flamethrowers, while devastating weapons, were tools that reduced but did not eliminate these costs. Each bunker engagement remained a close combat action, requiring infantry to advance against positions designed to kill them. Extended flamethrower range provided tactical advantage, but did not fundamentally alter the arithmetic of fortified warfare. Marines still died approaching positions. Flamethrower operators still became casualties. The modifications simply improved the odds slightly in a battle where every advantage mattered. The technical details of M2-2 flamethrower operation illuminate why modifications were both possible and dangerous. The weapon system consisted of 2 fuel tanks, a nitrogen pressure tank, an ignition system, and a nozzle assembly connected by reinforced hoses. Fuel flowed from storage tanks through a valve controlled by the trigger mechanism. Nitrogen pressure forced fuel through the system at velocities determined by pressure levels and fuel viscosity. The ignition system, either electrical or pyrotechnic depending on model variant, ignited fuel as it exited the nozzle. Increasing nitrogen pressure accelerated fuel flow, extending range but increasing stress on hoses and connectors. Standard rubber hoses rated for 360 pounds per square inch could fail catastrophically at 450 pounds per square inch, potentially covering the operator with ignited fuel. This risk made the substitution of higher pressure hoses essential for safe modification. Marines who attempted pressure modifications without upgrading hoses endangered themselves and nearby personnel. The fuel mixture modifications required understanding combustion chemistry. Thickened fuel burned longer and stuck to targets, but dispersed more slowly in air, limiting range. Thinner fuel projected farther but might not achieve sustained burning on impact. The optimal mixture balanced these factors, creating fuel viscous enough to maintain a coherent stream over 40 yards, while thin enough to flow at increased velocities through the nozzle assembly. Marines experimented with mixture ratios through trial and error. Initial attempts produced fuel either too thick to flow properly or too thin to burn effectively on impact. D'Amato's background in fuel chemistry allowed more systematic experimentation. He recognized that temperature affected fuel viscosity, leading to the discovery that mixing fuel at specific temperatures produced more consistent results than mixing at ambient conditions. His notes specified mixing temperatures, stirring times, and thickener proportions with precision that reflected scientific method applied to combat engineering. The nitrogen pressure regulation system provided another modification avenue. Standard M2O-2 flamethrowers used simple pressure regulators maintaining constant pressure during operation. Marines discovered that manually adjusting pressure immediately before firing allowed brief bursts at higher pressure without sustained stress on fuel lines. This technique, while requiring practice and precise timing, enabled maximum range shots, without the constant high-pressure stress that endangered equipment integrity. Training flamethrower operators in these techniques became an informal school conducted by experienced personnel. Corporal Klare, after his initial successes on Iwo Jima, spent 3 days instructing newly assigned flamethrower operators on pressure adjustment techniques and firing positions that maximized range. His instruction emphasized safety protocols, proper timing for pressure adjustments, and recognition of equipment stress indicators that signaled impending failure. The weapon maintenance requirements increased with modifications. Higher pressures and modified fuels accelerated wear on seals, valves, and ignition systems. Flamethrower operators learned to inspect equipment more frequently, replacing wear items before they failed in combat. Supply personnel maintained stocks of spare parts, particularly pressure seals and fuel line connectors, that exceeded pre-modification consumption rates. Japanese intelligence efforts to understand American flamethrower capabilities included attempts to capture intact weapons for examination. Several instances during the Iwo Jima battle involved Japanese attacks apparently aimed at American supply areas where flamethrower fuel and equipment were stored. None succeeded in capturing modified weapons for detailed analysis, though Japanese forces did recover standard M2O-2 flamethrowers from battlefield casualties. Analysis of these captured weapons confirmed Japanese intelligence assessments that standard American flamethrowers had effective ranges of 20 to 25 yards. This analysis, conducted by Japanese ordnance specialists, failed to identify the modifications that extended range on some weapons. The pressure regulators and fuel mixtures that enabled extended range were not visually distinctive from standard configurations. Only detailed testing would have revealed the modifications, and Japanese forces lacked the controlled testing facilities to conduct such analysis on a contested battlefield. The broader Pacific War context shaped flamethrower development and employment throughout 1944 and 1945. Each campaign provided lessons that influenced subsequent operations. Tarawa, in November 1943, demonstrated the need for effective bunker reduction weapons. Saipan, in June 1944, showed that standard flamethrowers lacked sufficient range for many tactical situations. Peleliu, in September 1944, revealed cave warfare challenges that would dominate later campaigns. By the time Marines landed on Iwo Jima in February 1945, tactical doctrine for flamethrower employment had evolved substantially from early war procedures. Flamethrower teams operated as integral components of rifle squads rather than as separate specialist detachments. Multiple flamethrowers were assigned to each assault company, providing redundancy if operators became casualties. Supporting arms coordination emphasized suppressive fire during flamethrower team movements, protecting vulnerable operators during approach and engagement. The modifications that extended flamethrower range represented the final evolution of this tactical development. Earlier improvements had focused on operator protection, fuel efficiency, and reliability under combat conditions. The range modifications addressed the specific challenge of engaging positions designed to exploit flamethrower range limitations. Each improvement built on previous combat experience in a continuous cycle of tactical problem identification and technical solution development. American industrial capacity supported this innovation cycle through responsive production and supply systems. When Marines identified requirements for higher pressure fuel hoses, manufacturers produced them in quantities sufficient to supply units throughout the Pacific. Modified ignition systems, improved nozzles, and enhanced pressure regulators flowed to combat units within months of requirements identification. This industrial responsiveness, combined with tactical innovation at unit level, created a dynamic weapon development process that continuously adapted to battlefield requirements. Japanese defenders lacked equivalent industrial support for weapons development and production. By 1945, American submarines and air attacks had severed supply lines between Japan and forward defensive positions. Equipment lost or damaged in combat could not be replaced. Ammunition expenditure was strictly controlled to preserve limited stocks. This material scarcity constrained Japanese defensive options, regardless of tactical skill or determination. The contrast between American material abundance and Japanese scarcity manifested clearly in flamethrower operations. Marines could expend fuel freely, refueling multiple times daily if tactical situations required. Japanese defenders rationed ammunition for weapons more critical than flamethrowers, which Japanese forces employed rarely in defensive operations. The asymmetry extended beyond individual engagements to encompass entire operational concepts. The final week of fighting on Iwo Jima saw flamethrower employment shift from bunker reduction to cave clearance. As organized Japanese resistance collapsed, defenders withdrew into cave systems in the island's northern region. These positions, protected by multiple layers of rock and earth, resisted conventional weapons. Flamethrowers provided the primary method for forcing surrender or eliminating defenders who refused to surrender. The cave clearance operations employed flamethrowers in combination with explosives and psychological warfare. Interpreters broadcast surrender appeals, while flamethrower teams positioned to engage cave entrances if appeals were refused. Many defenders chose death over surrender, requiring Marines to systematically burn each cave position. The process was methodical and grim, exemplifying the Pacific War's character in its final phase. Corporal Klare survived Iwo Jima and participated in Okinawa operations before the war's end. His service record shows 3 Purple Hearts for wounds received in action and a Bronze Star for valor during bunker reduction operations on Iwo Jima. After the war, he returned to Detroit, worked in the same machine shop he had left to enlist, and rarely discussed his combat experiences. His modifications to flamethrower equipment, which had contributed to destroying hundreds of Japanese defensive positions, remained an unofficial innovation, never formally credited in Marine Corps historical records. Sergeant Wilkins was killed on Okinawa on May 12, 1945, while engaging a cave complex near Shuri Castle. His flamethrower team had destroyed 17 defensive positions in the preceding week. Japanese machine gun fire killed Wilkins. As he positioned to engage his 18th target, he was 23 years old. His widow received notification that he died in action, but was not informed of the specific circumstances. The agricultural spraying equipment knowledge he brought from civilian life to military service died with him, though the techniques he developed for flamethrower employment survived in the institutional memory of units he served with. Private First Class D'Amato survived the war and returned to New Jersey, where he operated his father's gas station until retirement. In 1992, interviewed by a Marine Corps historian researching flamethrower employment in the Pacific, D'Amato described the fuel mixing techniques he developed on Iwo Jima. The interview, preserved in the Marine Corps History Division archives, represents one of the few detailed first-hand accounts of the technical modifications that extended flamethrower range. D'Amato died in 2003 at age 79. The Dahlin, historical documentation of flamethrower modifications, remains fragmentary. Official Marine Corps technical manuals do not explicitly describe the pressure and fuel mixture alterations that extended M20-2 range. After-action reports mention extended range engagements without detailing the modifications that enabled them. The innovations spread through informal channels. Veteran operators instructing new personnel in techniques that violated technical manuals but saved lives. This informal knowledge transfer characterized much of American tactical innovation during the Pacific War. Official doctrine provided frameworks, but individual Marines and small units adapted procedures to meet specific battlefield requirements. Successful adaptations spread through social networks, were validated through combat results, and eventually influenced official doctrine revisions. The cycle operated continuously throughout the war, creating dynamic tactical evolution that Japanese forces struggled to counter. The strategic impact of flamethrower innovations, while difficult to quantify precisely, contributed to American victory in the Pacific. Fortified defensive positions that might have required days to reduce were destroyed in hours. Casualties among assault infantry decreased when flamethrower teams could engage from safer distances. The psychological impact on Japanese defenders undermined their confidence in defensive preparations that had cost enormous labor to construct. These effects accumulated across campaigns. By war's end in August 1945, American forces had developed comprehensive doctrine for employing flamethrowers against every type of Japanese defensive position. Tank-mounted and man-portable flamethrowers, standard and modified weapons, operated in coordinated systems that provided flame capability at tactical, operational, and even strategic levels. The proposed invasion of Japan incorporated massive flamethrower employment as a central component of plans to overcome anticipated Japanese resistance. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki eliminated the need to execute these invasion plans. Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945. The flamethrower tactics developed through 4 years of Pacific warfare became historical artifacts rather than operational procedures. However, the principles underlying the innovations, tactical adaptation, field modification, continuous improvement based on combat feedback, remained embedded in American military culture. The Marine Corps after World War II institutionalized many innovations that had originated as unofficial field modifications. Equipment development processes incorporated formal mechanisms for collecting feedback from combat units. Testing procedures validated field modifications before incorporating them into official technical standards. Training programs taught adaptive thinking, encouraging Marines to identify problems and develop solutions rather than rigidly adhering to prescribed procedures. These institutional changes reflected lessons learned from experiences like the flamethrower modifications on Iwo Jima. The Marines who extended weapon range through pressure adjustments and fuel mixture alterations demonstrated that effective military organizations empower individuals to innovate within their areas of expertise. The challenges facing modern military forces differ from those encountered on volcanic islands in the Pacific, but the principle of adaptive innovation remains constant. The Japanese defenders who died in bunkers on Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and other Pacific battlefields faced weapons that exceeded their intelligence assessments and defensive preparations. Their deaths resulted not from lack of courage or tactical skill, but from material and industrial disparities that manifested in American ability to modify and improve equipment continuously. The extended-range flamethrowers represented one small component of this larger pattern, but their impact on individual engagements was decisive. The 200 bunkers burned in 48 hours during the early stages of the Iwo Jima battle represented both a tactical achievement and a technological adaptation. Marines who modified flamethrowers saved lives, both their own and those of fellow infantry who would have died in conventional assaults on fortified positions. The innovations were unofficial, undocumented in many cases, and unrecognized by formal awards and commendations. They were also representative of how wars are actually fought and won, through the accumulated small innovations of individuals facing immediate problems with life or death stakes. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.